We do this project in our English for Academic Purposes 508 class, which is Graduate Writing the Disciplines, that students respond really well to. So let me just talk about that as a potential activity, because I think it's something that can be used at the graduate level, as we do, but also at the undergraduate level. And it doesn't need to happen in a language class, and it doesn't need to happen in a writing class. It could really happen anywhere, as long as you can take some of the nuts and bolts and put it back together in a context that makes sense for you. So what we did is we thought about what are some of the common needs of graduate students here at Mason, or really in any graduate program in the U.S. And we realized that participating in seminar-style discussions was critical to their success. And so what we did is we built this project called the Graduate Classroom Language Portfolio Project. And so what we have done is we've come up with a set of common readings. So there are 8 journal articles, and they're relevant to a theme. In this case, our theme is International Scholars and Scholarship. And so we've asked all of our students, all of whom are international graduate students, so the theme is relevant to them, to read these 8 articles. And the articles are about language anxiety, about socialization in graduate school, about working with dissertation advisors, about
writing workshop models, resources for graduate students.
So they're relevant readings. They're reading them because they actually care about the content, which is key. So they're all reading the 8 articles, and then there are a series of things that they have to do for each of the 8 articles that they read. So the first thing is to annotate, and we talk about how to annotate a journal article. We give out examples, we show what articles that we've annotated, we make lists of different strategies used. We talk about sort of the idiosyncratic nature of annotating, that what works for me might not work for you, and we give credit to the students on their annotations. So we collect their annotated articles, we read through them, and we comment on their comments. So that's part 1 for all of the 8 articles that happens. The second thing is that the students read a 250-word summary of the article. And so they have to identify 5 to 10 key terms, concepts from the article, list the correct citation format according to the citation format for their discipline at the top. So there's some formatting, there's identifying key vocabulary, and then there's summarizing the main project of the article, the purpose of the article, a few key concepts from the article, and then they have to use the terms that they've identified as key terms in their summary themselves. So they have to identify but then also utilize those words in different word forms in their own writing. And then the second part of that is a critique. So they have to then, not a typical response, but be thoughtful about the way that they are not just reporting on what the article said or the case that it makes, but to really respond to it in terms of connecting this particular article to the theme of the course, this International Scholar and Scholarship theme, and then connect it to the other articles that we have read in the series.
Can I pause for a second?
Sure.
One of the other challenges with multilingual students, especially international students who haven't been exposed to the U.S. Academy, is, and I know I've heard this from faculty members too, is this concern that students aren't critically engaging with texts. And that's because they come from the test-based culture where they just read and sort of absorb the information and then regurgitate it on the test. And so this component of the project that Karyn is describing, where the students are asked to engage the text and write that summary critique or that article critique, is really important and actually very challenging for the students in the beginning, because they're being asked to engage in a way that they have never really been exposed to before. So that's why that part is in there, and then where the summary is sort of articulated as a summary of the project and the purpose, not of the content. So students aren't doing like a rote summary of the source, but are actually thinking rhetorically about the way that the source is working and what the author is doing.
So the last part of this activity or this project is for students to develop discussion questions in preparation for the seminar discussion that we have. And so to do that, we don't just say, generate a list of questions that you can ask, but we really specify. So you need to have 2 clarification questions. So find 2 terms that you think you know, or even phrases, that you think you understand or you totally don't understand, and form a question around, I think the author means X when she uses the term Y. What do you think? Does anybody else have a different idea? This author uses the term socialization, and I understand that term to be this, but the author seems to be using it differently. What do you think the author means? So really clarifying key concepts and key terms from an article, clarification questions. And then we ask them to also come up with application questions. So reading this article made me think that maybe as graduate students we should be proactive in working with our dissertation advisors in these following ways. Have any of you tried to do these things? What's worked and what hasn't worked? So it's kind of taking what the content of the article, applying it to themselves as international students, and then asking for one another's thoughts, suggestions, experiences, and so on. Other types of questions are also vocabulary focused or concept focused, but really breaking it down in clear ways. So it's not just like a general, write a bunch of questions, but write these different types of questions. The last part of this is that for each of those 8 readings, so they're doing the annotation, the summary, the critique, and then writing the discussion questions. The last part of it is that for each one of those 8 readings, 2 students are asked to lead the seminar discussion. And so those 2 students have to come up with a PowerPoint and a lesson plan for how they're going to lead a 50-minute seminar discussion. And Anna and I, as the faculty, sit in the back of the room and just take notes on how the discussion unfolds from a language perspective, but also from a composition perspective. And just content, since we know these readings well as well. So that brings in the oral component and the discussion and sort of the pressure to lead a 50-minute discussion, and to keep facilitating the next part of the discussion, even when there's a lull in the conversation. So students complete that 8 times, and then they submit all of this in a portfolio, and then receive oral feedback from us as soon as the lesson is over, the 50-minute seminar is over. We provide oral feedback immediately. So from a language standpoint, it might be pronunciation, it might be word stress, it might be phrases or vocabulary, but it also could be gesturing to each other or referring back to a comment somebody else made, interrupting politely, adding new content, tacking on structurally with language what I want to say to what you just said, to what she said 3 minutes ago, disagreeing with one another, things like that. So really just sort of how is language playing a role in the way in which we're going to orally communicate with one another in a professional and academic way. And then they also receive written feedback, so grammar feedback, but also content feedback and composition feedback and organization and format for each of those 8 articles. So it doesn't seem like much in the sense that they're just reading, but all of the layers that we build into how they read and how they come up with these questions and what we expect for the summary and how a summary is different than a critique, and then how to lead a discussion and how to participate, it's all folded into this recursive process. They're going through the same thing 8 times, and repeatedly we say, now how can we use what we learned today in a graduate seminar you're going to in a few minutes or in your other classes right now. And so it's applicable. They can see the relevance of doing this activity in class to their other graduate classes. It's general enough that it's relevant and it transfers. So that's one activity. Again, it could be used at the undergraduate level, could be used at the graduate level. It doesn't have to happen in a writing class or in a language classroom. And I think there are pieces of it that I think, maybe not in total, but I think if I were a faculty member looking for a way to build in some of those receptive skills into my writing class, or to get students to engage so that they can meet my expectations for an oral communication seminar style discussion, these are ways that I think it could be done.